Greetings, gang. CS Bernard here for Geeky News once again. And boy, am I glad to go ahead and say that I've got my monitor back. I got a new tripod for the camera to make things a little easier on setting up for filming and all that. And I'm starting to kind of pull this whole thing together the way I'd prefer to have it. Now, as you can see, I've been to see the Avengers. And how was it? Pretty damn radical. But before we start, I want to go ahead and address a few things. Right now, everyone knows there are a number of trailers floating around with this movie, and it just kind of, is a nice little hors d'oeuvre to get you, settled for the main course of this film is awesome. The one that really snagged my attention, I know that everybody's been aware of the Dark Knight trailer for, The Dark Knight Rises, the third one for that. I'm aware everyone's talking about that. What was a real treat for me was going to see the Expendables 2 trailer. And that's something that really fired me up because if you follow my Twitter account, I often go ahead and address a calendar I have Chuck Norris facts, once every day except for Sundays. Because, well, it only hits Saturday, Sunday, the calendar does. But the fact that I have mentioned Chuck Norris means that Chuck Norris is in this movie! Holy shit! Oh, that's just such a great thing. Yay! I don't know, it really offsets the cast that we have already had before. Pretty much everyone before, Sylvester Stallone, Jason Statham, Jet Li. I mean, I could roll off a whole list of 1980s to today's, action-packed thriller stars. And, of course, returning back to the big screen is Arnold Schwarzenegger. I don't know if he'll get, like, the brief cameo appearance that he did in the Expendables film, the first one, but he does get more presence in the trailer, which is a nice treat. We also get Jean-Claude Van Damme and a few others that weren't there in the first film. But it looks to be pretty good. It boils down that the plot is going to be 1980s cheese on a B-movie budget. Well, no, I take it back. The budgets for these films are pretty good, but come on, you've got Predator, you've got, Rambo, it's all that stuff. It's each of all those movies just crammed together in one big orgasm of 1980s, super violence. And, well, just Expendables 2, be on the lookout for it. The only other trailer I got at my local theater over in the next county was for another Disney Pixar film, Brave, which, I don't know, I'm somewhat interested, but, well, we've seen Tangled, and I'm not being really wowed with this film as being too different from that. I am not going to say, by any stretch of the imagination anytime soon, that, Pixar is starting to run out of steam or lose ideas or anything like that. But, well, like I said, I've already made a Tangled comparison, and that was another Disney film. And it does play with the whole concept of turning the damsel in distress fairy tale upside down on its head. And apparently, with the success of How to Train Your Dragon, we're going with a lot more Scottish brogue for this film, what with it being set in, Celtic lands. I don't know. I want it to be good because, Pixar has brought us so many good films. I mean, that was half of the trailer was, from the studio that brought you Up, that brought you Toy Story 3, that brought you, and blah, 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 all that. Well, you know what I'm getting at. The point is, we'll see how Brave rolls out. It looks to be good. I mean, again, Pixar doesn't do bad stuff, but I'm not really being wowed with the, I'm not going to say source material or anything like that, or, concepts, but it's familiar things. We'll see how it plays out. My nephew, was more excited for it than I was, and that's just, difference between he and I. But anyway, Avengers Okay? Avengers, that's what you came to see. Now, I don't want to get too deep into this film in terms of, like, spoilers, and there are several pretty damn good ones. You know, the after-credit stingers are pretty good, and there are two of them this time. You know, one after the big flashy credits, and then one at the very, very main end, and both are pretty good. I love them. I'm really fired up for a second Avengers film. So, you know, already. First and foremost, I want to go ahead and give this thing a near perfect score. You know, it's one of those things that I want to gush about and act like they did it perfectly, but we have to be realistic. We have to be grounded in the fact that no movie really has been perfect. No director, no writer, no team of creative consultants and everything like that, none of them are all going to come together and make a perfect concept, a perfect anything. But they can come pretty damn close, and The Avengers is it. As far as a comic book film, I know that, for instance, a lot of the dry humor and wit that comes in this film, and I have to give it credit, it does have a lot of that. I appreciate the film for having a very positive spin. It has a very optimistic view of superheroes versus things like where you had Watchmen and a few other films like Kick-Ass that kind of put a bad, give superheroes a bad rap. The Avengers give them a very good rap, and I appreciate that. I don't know, though, how they'll spin that with the new Spider-Man film coming out later this year with the reboot, and I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not really impressed with mopey Peter Parker slumped up into a hoodie. That's not kosher. At the same time, I'm caught in betwixt and between on that with the fact you have now the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon, and I will be making comparisons between this film and the Earth's Mightiest Heroes animated series on Disney XD. But with Ultimate Spider-Man and The Amazing Spider-Man coming out, I'm kind of caught in betwixt and between. One's too lighthearted, Ultimate Spider-Man. One's too rough-looking, being The Amazing Spider-Man coming out later this year. We'll see. Anyway, to not delve too much into the synopsis and plot of the film, we've all seen the trailers. We know that Loki has basically come back to use an army from across the galaxy to conquer the Earth. And, well, let's get down to it. That's a really good supervillain plot. It's not something you go ahead and bandy about and like, ooh, it's something we haven't seen before, but it's well done. There is a certain scale of cosmic things going on here. However, that is one moment I do kind of want to criticize a bit. The aliens in this film, the Chitauri, I believe, are basically stand-ins for the KREE or SKRULLS, either group from the comic books. And I want to go ahead and say KREE more because you had one of the KREE high officials, I think the name is Ronan the Accuser, from the books. He basically has a stand-in in this film that acts as the, as the Accuser does in the comic books, who partners with Loki, And that's about it. We're not really given an in-depth spiel on that. And worse, I have to say that the portrayal of Loki here is less sympathetic than he was in the Thor film. And I know that's saying something because Thor was directed by Kenneth Branagh and had the more Shakespearean spin to it. And I kind of took a minor dig out of, in the film, Tony does, mock Thor with the line of, so this is what, Shakespeare in the Park? Doth thine mother know thou art wearing her drapes? Well, considering this film is being directed by Joss Whedon, and I know everybody loves Joss Whedon, and, you know, only the Spoonie one recently took a lot of abuse on the Spoonie experiment with Noah Wilder making a few unpopular remarks about Joss Whedon. I'm not going to engage in a very huge diatribe and argument with the internet like he did, but I am going to say that he does raise points. And I do kind of don't know if Whedon was taking a bit of a jab at Kenneth Branagh's portrayal of Thor and Loki in his film, what with it being a Shakespearean-trained actor, and then, you know, well, comparing that to the man that is famous for Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And I'm going to comment on that while I do appreciate the film having a positive spin on heroes, there's a certain level of snark and humor that almost gets out of place at times. Whereas you had greater sense of drama in Captain America and Thor and a lot of the preceding films, even Iron Man. Yeah, even Iron Man. You kind of get a more lighthearted spin here that, as I said, it has the more Buffy feel to it. That being said, it can be a bit of a wreck at times. I don't know, somehow it upsets the flow of certain combative moments. At other times, it's friggin' perfect and spot on. I'm very glad that the Hulk, who was given a lot of wangst and angst in his two films, got to experiment with, you know, more humor. And this is where it delves more into the animated series on Disney XD through Marvel and Disney Productions, is that here the Hulk is actually allowed to do at least one really awesome witty remark. He doesn't do that in his movies, and I'll have to give him credit. It's very well deserved here, especially with the fact that here Loki is given the more Saturday morning, you know, Earth's Mightiest Heroes animated line of just, you know, being evil. There's no necessary torture of conflicted interests and what. And that is a downstep for me. I was looking forward more to Loki as someone caught in his own issues. There were moments, but there weren't as many here. I would have to, you know, give the Thor Kenneth Branagh Loki more credit than I would this one here. But it still doesn't make him any less of a threat, nor do a good number of his scenes bring him down too low. He's still very dramatic and, you know, Shakespearean, at least in terms of how evil he is versus the conflicted or tormented soul. He's definitely gone from, you know, the conflicted soul, such as like a Hamlet, to being more of a straight-out villainous character like Richard III. And that's cool. That's cool. It's, you know, it gets what it needs to done. And for the most part, I'm going to shout again that the Marvel films have perfected portraying their characters versus coming up with the dramatic story. Warner Brothers and DC Comics have actually done, just as, you know, my nephew had commented some time ago, and I can't remember if I made it clear in the Captain America review, but in those films, in the DC films, they worry more about character, or they worry more about the plot than in the character, whereas Marvel worries more about character than the plot. And I'm going to have to say that for Marvel, it's working a lot better. With, you know, my main complaints in the Green Lantern review were the fact that the characters had tons of potential, but they weren't properly exploited, and the narrative suffered as a result. Here, the narrative is, you know, I'll give a C+, but the characters really bump it up and make it considerably better. And as a comic book fan, that's really good. You know, This is a very good film for the comic book fan in general, and you know, movies like this will draw in more of the mainstream audience rather than just the comic book nerds hanging out in their little shops, you know, and reading their books, myself included. But well, yeah, it's a big world out there, guys. We gotta, you know, open ourselves up to it sometime. I digress, though. The moments, though, that really kind of offset this movie for me are the fact that I have now sit through 2 Marvel Comics films and had Warner Brothers and DC Comics be cribbed a bit. There were too many familiar moments. In Iron Man 2, it was the motivation of Whiplash, who was, you know, acting more like the Joker. And here in the Avengers, there is a scene where, you know, spoilers, Loki gets captured, which is somewhat hinted at in the trailers, but isn't, you know, gone into great detail. I'm going to tell you he is captured, and it plays out very much like in The Dark Knight, that the Joker allows himself to be captured and uses it to sabotage the heroes. And I must give credit where credit is due, though, because he, well, he is more of the master manipulator here than not necessarily in the Thor film. He was very manipulative, he was very deceptive, but here he was more artfully the villain. And that's where, you know, going from a Hamlet-style villain to Richard III style villain, that's cool. That's awesome. One of the things, though, that I found interesting that my brother, who went with me to see this film, criticized was the fact that Thor is underutilized as a demigod. And I didn't necessarily debate him on the fact, but I do put it out there as a possibility that he says that Thor is too grounded in the fact that he doesn't fly as much during combat, and we don't get to see as much of the Thunderer's lightning abilities. Now, that may cheap shot it, or he may have been pacing himself. You can go ahead and come up with all sorts of your own theories, but in my own opinion, I think that thanks to having watched Thor, we saw him, you know, have his toy, Mjolnir, the hammer, taken away, and he's forced to rely a large part of that film on his own brute strength and being much more human than demigod. And that's probably playing out here in this film, though I must admit, you've probably seen the trailers, and you of course have your standard superhero on superhero fight with Thor, you know, going mano a mano against some of the other Avengers, and he uses the, you know, the thunder and lightning and flying more often there. But during the main battle, it's a bit more not there. That's where, again, I'd have to go ahead and point to the Earth's Mightiest Heroes animated series and say that there he does behave more like, you know, a demigod, which is rather nice. I mean, come on, he has thunder and lightning in, you know, weaponized form. How can you say no? Another thing I want to criticize in terms of the film is the fact that the Hulk does a more dramatic changeover from just chaotic neutral to chaotic good. That he does recognize evil, and he does have more of his attitude, his rage and anger turned against the villains. One will debate that. In The Incredible Hulk, there we saw the mental process going from just an unstoppable rage monster over to being a genuine hero and more in control of himself. We had that there, but here at the start of this film, it's demonstrated as being a bit more out of control. Again, that may be, more to do with Loki's manipulations. I'll just let that float. And I do find it interesting. They do make a very clear demonstration of that. So I will cut that some slack. And once he's more at himself, Bruce Banner does affect, the Hulk better throughout the rest of the film, and that's a very good plus. And it also gives him chances to, again, be more witty and more fun. Hulk smash indeed. And I do look forward as Mark Ruffalo being Dr. Banner through more films. There have been rumors and, a few nods and winks that, yeah, he'll be in, future films from here on out, rather than, the kind of stumbling blocks we had in the previous Hulk films. I'm now looking forward to more Hulk films with Mark Ruffalo. I wasn't too thrilled with the previous installments. And, and as I had mentioned in the Captain America review, Tony Stark does indeed play off very well with more teammates and a superhero group to be a part of. I'm going to have to take a while, though, for Cap's, finalized costume to kind of grow on me. Although I must admit, it was better than, his own film's weird kind of attempt at the costume. It did better. I'll give it that much. It was a much better visualization. To kind of get to wrapping this up, I will say this much, that if you've enjoyed all of the Marvel Comics films up to now, then yes, the wait has been very much worth it. The films have tied together very nicely with all sorts of little threads throughout all the other films coming together here, and coming together not necessarily perfectly, but unifying in one grand theme and scheme. And as stated, it ends on a very good note. And it ends with, the sequel bait, the post-credit stingers, doing a very good job. We have a very interesting future for the Avengers, and, a lot of, big hope for the next installments of the other films with Captain America, Thor, Iron Man, and I'm hoping the Hulk. The Hulk hasn't been locked in and confirmed for sequels, but this will definitely go ahead and really give him a shot in the arm. These films will expand out further. I'm hoping we'll see more Avengers over time. After all, a lot of people grumbled considerably over missing original founding members, the Wasp and Ant-Man. Given their skill set and a few other things, though, we'll have to wait and see on how they get brought into these films. If they don't, I'd be cool with just Black Widow and Hawkeye doing their thing to balance out the films in their own way. They have, of course, their own precedents in these films, and I'm cool with them. I don't know how most everyone else will be. Now, if I wanted to give this a scoring from a purely comic book geek perspective, where it just, speaks to me, a subculture, I'd give this film 5 out of 5. And most any of you that, were already fired up for this movie to begin with, yeah, you're already pounding your way to this movie. I mean, that's why I didn't want to give any, hardly any spoilers, just vague ones. And, you already know you're going to go see this. For the general mainstream audience, though, who won't get as much, they have had their own experiences with the previous films, and it'll all tie nicely together for them. But the plot isn't that standoutish. Loki is keyed down as a more sympathetic villain, and several other changes. I'd have to give the film more of a 4 out of 5. It's got great cinematography, great visuals, and most of the characterizations are fantastic. We can basically go ahead and say that with the Avengers, we've come full circle from superhero films that had bombed out in the late 1990s and had to struggle to regain themselves in the new millennium. We've come through that, and the Avengers have capstoned it off, and we can basically look forward to Marvel dominating the theaters for years to come. We'll have to see what DC's response will be later on in this year with their only film this year, only notable film, that being Dark Knight Rises. With, of course, Marvel also getting another movie before the year's out, The Amazing Spider-Man. Where will it go? How will things be? Don't know, but with a movie like this, I have nothing but a glowing review. So that's it from me, C.S. Bernard. Check you out next time for Geeky News.